Hey, what's good, everybody? My name's Alckemy. Welcome to the channel. Today, you and I are going to be taking a look at the base playgrounds of my latest pack, Ecclesia, and I wanted to walk through with you how to actually use these things in case if you purchase this pack and you're like, what the heck do I do with it? So, case in point, everything is related towards either A, creating a phrase or creating variation in order to be able to resample later into a phrase. So I'm going to be kind of taking you through all of the features that there's 11 of these included in this pack have to offer. And even if you don't pick up this pack and it's not for you, you might be able to learn some tips on how this could be useful for you in the first place. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about what all this patch does. And I will be walking you through just the whole philosophy and mindset behind what makes this stuff really fun. So I'm going to turn everything off, and I would want to start with the oscillator section because we have a couple of things here that these macros are mapped to that we'll be able to use to our advantage. So first and foremost, if we turn all of the major stuff off, the major component to this is just the thing right here. And this goes from an analog wave that can morph into a sine wave. You can pick whatever, but it's pretty much just a standard Reese. Now, one thing that can be super helpful is applying a macro to an LFO, and this LFO can go into the pitch here. And what this can do for us is basically create pitch bends. And so if you're looking for fills or anything like that, right now at the beginning of this patch, it's usually just like 3 semitones, but you can turn this up to however much you want. And then you can adjust the LFO to create a phrase or a shape. Keep this in your pocket for a bit because this is going to make more sense here in just a little bit. So if we go to the next section here, this is the wavetable that is in raw harmonics, and you can see that I've got this mapped over here. And what this does is gives us some extra harmonics to play with when we're trying to make our basses and stuff sound fatter. So if you're used to making really distorted sines and whatnot, this can kind of give you a huge range of options, which honestly past this point is going to be unusable anyways, but utilizing stuff like this will kind of give you some extra texture on top, especially when being sent through a distortion. And right now it's really quiet, so I'm just going to make sure that this is applied. These two are just OTTs, but if I add a little bit of crunch to this, it'll make a little bit more sense. Here it kind of gives it a little bit more scream. The next thing that we have is the wavetable itself, which this is labeled as Awawa. And what this does is gives us a table to kind of scan through here if we turn on the FM. So this isn't going to work until we use the mod wheel. But what I've done is I've applied FM to the first source. And if we start to turn this up, you'll see that it will start to get crazy. So now once you pass a certain point, especially with harmonically rich waveforms kind of like saws and squares, it's going to all sound the same anyways, but if you're kind of subtle with it, then you'll be able to hear the differences. Where this really shines is, of course, on a sine wave, because that way you're going to be able to tell what this is actually doing a lot more. So yeah. And then the next thing that we have up here is the the harmonized knob, which is basically just going to give us a little bit of stereo and top end that's a fifth. So, an octave. So. And you can adjust this and change this in anything. If you want this to be in mono, you can. And I really think that it's important to be able to kind of skim through this stuff and to make changes to it, because that's kind of the whole philosophy behind this stuff. And so what I mean by that is if, let's say you're using the Awawa table and you want to change it out, well, why don't you change it into something else that's included? Or if we go into my users and we go here, there's 47 different wavetables to choose from that all have drastically different shapes. Some of these you'll notice have similar names, but that's just because One ended up being one of several wavetables, but in the same patch. So it's a little bit easier for me to keep track of like what did what. Plus it's a little bit easier to name as well, as opposed to trying to come up with a unique name for each one. But if we go back to that same concept and maybe we just turn off the harmonize and go back to this and start to reintroduce this, we'll have a lot of variations of distorted basses already. So now is a good time to introduce the next set of things, which is the simple and complex racks. This is basically kind of like your one-stop shop to creating all different kinds of bass phrases that, you know, you might want to implement within a track. And so if we start off with the simple, I think that this is the easiest to explain. If we open this up, you'll see that it's just some filter movement with some distortion. If you look in here, you can see that I've created a wavetable filter, and now you might realize why this stuff is labeled into different things, because the Awawa rack goes with the Awawa preset and kind of color coded and whatnot. Again, hold that in your pocket because we're going to talk about that here in a second. So if I turn this on, then you have two LFOs here, and that's why I left them open, because you can create different shapes with them. So so yeah, you can get lost in that, and then you can change the LFO speed and stuff, which will go astronomically faster. But yeah, that's really fun. So with that being said, I would say definitely kind of have fun with changing that and changing the shapes and all that stuff. But where the real magic is with the, I'm gonna go ahead and turn that back on, the complex rack, which is kind of the same thing except like on crack, because this is pretty much our neuro bass processors and stuff that will give you a lot of detail and a lot of movement within. So the main things that we want to focus on, these do stuff, and I'm going to kind of walk you through them, but keep in mind that this is going to be the big drivers of how to use this. And that's kind of why I want to explain it, because if you just start turning stuff, you know, it's not going to be like, what is this doing? It's more of like, hey, here's how this all works together. So all of these LFOs are tied to something on here that are moving around, and you can map it to different stuff if you want to, or add or take things away. But where I find this the most inspiring is kind of changing the shapes of each of these in order to continue to shape the timbre of the sound. So if I start to move these, as you can hear, like we're starting to get some really cool sounds now. And now we can go and change stuff up here. So the BP lane is what's over here. Generally speaking, I'll leave this not at 100%, but this just controls the bandpass stuff. So if we turn this completely off, then the sound is going to be more open and only really bound by this filter. There is a lot of movement in the mids, but it's going to be more of an open sound. So So with this being said, if we were to figure out which one is controlling this, I believe, okay, so it's this one. So if we go back up here and we adjust this, there we go. So now we can kind of shape what this is doing. And then up here, we can actually change the phase of all this stuff. So now we can reintroduce this to give it some extra movement. Now the other stuff that we have on here is this will randomize the phase. So if you want, you can see that there's an orange line right here, and what this will do is start to move this at random. So if you make a pretty wonky shape, then you're going to get something a little different every time. So which is pretty cool. We have a cutoff here. If you want the sounds to be a little bit more, low key and a little bit more deep, it basically just cuts off the high end. And then over here we have a gate, which if you scroll all the way over here, you can create different shapes. So my recommendation would be to maybe grab this tool, and then once you're here, you can kind of create what would be similar to a transgate or something like that. And the reason why I don't have just a flat out transgate on this is because you actually have a lot more control both over the phase and the timing of how this plays out. You can actually put another LFO on this to modulate it, or to modulate the phase at random to make it kind of swing. So it just gives you a little bit more options as opposed to using just the standard transgate or whatever. But what this is going to do is it's going to make it go kind of choppy and cutty and stuff. And this is fun because if you start to turn the gate on and listen to this, then you can kind of create cool stutters like that will all kind of benefit off of the other stuff. And all of the things are pretty much kind of related. Even though these will all look very similar, I did do all these from scratch and they all have different characteristics about them. So now that we understand kind of the philosophy of this patch, that's kind of why I wanted to show you the templates that I've included, which this is the main one, which is just the sounds, the oscillator section, and then empty racks, as you can see here. If you wanted to utilize this and take inspiration and start to make your own effects and stuff, you absolutely can. But what this is really designed for are a couple of things, which I guess in essence is for customization. So first off, one thing that we can do is we can change this if we wanted to. The other thing that we could do instead is to actually just grab a wavetable, and now we've got even more options. So we can take the wavetable here, kind of like so, and apply this to the phase. And within this now, we can utilize the mod wheel to be able to control how much phase is going to this, right? And the way that I've been able to achieve that is instead of having to do double routing where this would normally turn yellow, I just have this set here, so that way I can adjust how much I want. So now we kind of have a mix behind a bunch of different stuff. Now the cool thing about this is that because I've gone through the trouble of making this, I can actually make a new patch by utilizing a combination of the stuff that I've included. So we can use the batch wavetable, don't ask, but now we've got this, and we've got a mixture of things that have complexity and more range of, frames in between that aren't, a complete waveform or whatever. And then we have the FM here, so. Something that you can even do if you want to take this a step further is even apply something like this to where now we're just working off of the wavetable. And again, it's just a matter of complexity, but I really want to show you all the options that you have available because you don't have to go very far to change it. It's kind of all just there for funsies. So. Cool. So we could open this up and start to apply some simple filtering over this. I think that all of these have this vanilla stuff because generally speaking, this is kind of like the right combination, quote unquote. But instead of doing that, why don't we just open this up and go into our Ecclesia multipass and be like, let's try this one because this is a simple filter. We can already kind of attach the mix to this so we don't actually have to do it over again. As long as this doesn't change, we can swap out the preset, which all of my presets within the Eternum through Requiem through Ecclesia are all designed this way. So, if you already have one of those packs, then, the mixing and matching factor just becomes tenfold. But yeah, now we can turn this on. Sounds pretty cool. We can add the pitch stuff now and just be like, maybe make this a little bit more dramatic. Or we could just go like super crazy with this and do like some crazy stuff like this. It's pretty ridiculous, but I think you get the point, right? So and the cool thing with this is that they can play off of each other now and develop a relationship. So if I wanted this to do this, maybe I can change the LFO speed to go a little bit slower and create another point here. And then maybe we can adjust this to make it kind of cool. So yeah, and basically you can kind of just get lost in that and create a bunch of different stuff. And then you're like, oh, okay, that's cool. Let's go ahead and change this into something different now. We can go to nice growl, nice grrl, simple, and then pretty much do the same thing where it should sound a little different. We can also, you know, do other things like very simply by adding in something like, I don't know, a phaser, and then be like, make your own, you know, save these variations to these patches and, you know, experiment. Don't be afraid to touch this stuff and like change it up and create your variations off of it. You know, different stuff like that. And that's kind of all available fairly quickly. And the other thing with this is that in the same light, we can also do this with the complex stuff, right? And keep in mind, I've only been using FM-esque things. We haven't even been using the other kind of like neuro-ish sounds or whatever. So when we get into this, we'll kind of have a lot more things to mess around with and, you know, get different variations or whatever. So if we take a look at Deadbolt, which this might have been a throwaway one or whatever, but I wanted to include it anyways. Yeah, some of these are a little bit different, but most of them kind of have something like this. In this case, this one is shaped to an LFO table. So but for the most part, I do like to have this kind of in this now because I like being able to transform this into unique shapes, even though the selection thing is pretty cool. It just means it's one less wavetable to have to mess with. But yeah, we can just kind of mess with that. Yeah, pretty cool. We can do something kind of like this. Wow. That's really cool. Sorry, I turned this on manually. I forgot that I was supposed to turn this on here. So we can pull this back off and then start to modulate in between this stuff now, or we can go to the unison and turn this on and be like, all right, what does this do? Okay, so this is pretty cool. Let's add a harmonic. And then let's change the harmonic. And then within this, we might want to adjust the multipass stuff, which this is an OTT, so we might want to bring the high end up. And then we can come in here and adjust the filter cutoff. We can do something. And then you can also experiment with a couple of different things. For one, even though we're not applying FM, we can also change this out into different stuff. So, sorry. Or what you can also do is just pull up here and be like, okay, well, let's try this with a completely different wavetable. So, and then we can also get in here and start to mess with, again, the shapes. And again, I have no idea what's going to be coming out of this kind of stuff. And that's kind of the point, is to be able to explore and change things up. But having said all of this stuff and creating a relationship behind all of these things, you can see that there's a lot of customization that you can get through just by diving into this stuff. But I mean, who's to say that you don't remove one of these racks and then use another one if your CPU can handle it? Or you can put another one inside of another one, or you know what I mean? Like, this kind of batch content is really made to be mixed and matched like Legos. The last thing that I want to leave you all with is creating 808s, and that's just one thing that I have to have in my music 9 times out of 10. So something that I've done is utilize this star or asterisk, parentheses close asterisk, which translates to 808. And all you have to do is pretty much just turn off the other knobs and stuff, and you will have a really nice fat 808 sound. And then you can kind of cycle through all this stuff if you want to, but this kind of gives it a little bit nice, like overtones on the top. And it's just a really fast way to get some good results if you want something that's like just a sub or some low end and all that other stuff. One final thing that I'll leave you all with is that the complex and the simple are mapped to MPE, both with pressure and timbre. And so if you have something here, which we do, we can kind of just maybe place something on an F, and we can kind of come up with a stupid riff. So we can do something. You know, just something very simple like that. And then what we can actually do is utilize the piano roll here, or if you have an MPE device, you can mess with this too. But we can adjust this to where we can change the timbre of some of this stuff. So let's say on this one, we go to timbre here. Well, this one can be on, this one can be off, this one can be on, that one can be on, and then this one can be on. And now look. This. Let's go ahead and do that there. Okay, this might not be MPE enabled, but the timbre on this should be going. And likewise, if we change this, there we go. I think I accidentally turned that off like that, but now that that's mapped, this is kind of going back and forth as well. And so you can get in here and start to just have something that's already moving, and then go in and start to change the shapes of this stuff. Then what's really cool is we can take all the MIDI information from here and duplicate this, or we can throw it over in the bank. And now what we can do is just change this up. So we can adjust this, maybe change this, go here, make this one big, go here. do all this kinds of stuff, and now we've got a variation. Something else that you can do is you can turn this off and go to never retrigger. And now what this will do is give you this, and you can set it to be slow. So now you've got custom movement all throughout the bar. So yeah, as you can see, there's a lot of different stuff that you can utilize on here to, you know, if you can put something down on the piano roll, then you can kind of use this as a jump off point to give yourself an idea. And then as you can see, I'm recording with rolling sampler. I know that you all are going to ask, this is called rolling sampler. It's the best 20 bucks you could ever spend on music production, but you can pull out all these variations. And then what you can do is go and change the patch completely again. So you could do that, and then you can be like, okay, let's use the wah-wah again. You'll see that the mapping stays the same. Yeah, so obviously it's very basic, and this is, you know, kind of just a means to get you going and get something to work with. But, you know, if you have a good sense of rhythm and all that stuff, this should give you plenty of timbres to work with. So that's pretty much the synopsis for how to utilize a lot of the bass stuff, both if you want to do things with FM or if you want to do things with neuro stuff. But hopefully that gives you enough to play with and really dive deep with how much you can actually get with these presets. And finally, if you know, anybody's interested, you can get this at alckemy.com. I have this both available as standalone, which is $30, and then I also offer a bundle, which is Requiem 1 through 3, as well as this pack for $120. So you end up saving 30 bucks. You pretty much buy 3, get 1 for free. So yeah, if anything, I would love it if you all could like the video, subscribe to the channel. If you've done something cool, let me know, you know, or if you've made your own version of this, let me know. But for the rest of the series, we're going to be talking about the other stuff that I have to offer within this pack outside of just the patches themselves, because there's a lot of cool things to explore and discover. Thanks, everybody. I'll see you all in the next video.